Okay, Dean Boles here. I think we're into week number 11 of this interesting time. We've been so fortunate to have Melinda Harrison with us, Olympian author and coach and executive coach. And so we're getting into the nuts and bolts of your book, I think. Last week we had three pieces of good information, and we're going to carry on with that acronym of practices. So, Melinda, welcome. Thank you very much for making some time for us, and we look forward to today's session.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to be here. Just as a little refresher, this is the information that came out of those 103 interviews that individuals that want to perform or want to be the best in the world, whatever they do, they use these practices to perfect their craft. And so that's why I believe it's so important to spend some time discussing them. And then, whether you're a coach or an athlete, you need to figure out how you're going to apply them to your situation.
Yeah, I see this as part of a great foundation, like a rock solid foundation to what, I think is very valuable for everyone, athlete, coach, onlooker, spectator, fan, everybody.
Parent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and it's. I think it's really going to lend itself well.
Yeah, I was thinking about your Swim Ontario officials and all the officials right across Canada. And when Annie was competing, I worked the pool deck just like every other parent worked the pool deck and had to get certified. And they too have to have these 9 practices. And so it'd be interesting to just touch upon that, on how it relates to somebody not in the pool or not on the deck as an expert coach, but rather somebody who's just volunteering their time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We've had some discussions regarding the officials and the people who are the planners in and around competitions and how things are going to look in the near future and maybe for a bit longer. They're very important to the contribution piece of our return, and at the same time, from our perspective, we're doing training. Nicole Perron, who's our officials part of the staff, but also a deliverer of the information to on the education certification of our officials. She's having to do it sort of remotely and also through a medium such as this. And there's lots of learning around it. I think that in itself, people, I think the idea of the camaraderie of the officials is quite interesting, because the people who stay on after their children have moved on and things like that, it's pretty amazing. I just find it so amazing that the element of the volunteer, the element of the official, and the whole passion for the sport. And I think they're missing that connectivity in a sense, right? So they're feeling it too. Yeah. And so you're right. Any tool such as this is going to be quite helpful. So looking forward to it today, Melinda. Let's get at it.
Okay, let's share that screen. There we go. Just do this. Okay, let's get at it.
Let's get at it. That's right. Yes. Let's get at it.
So again, the topic is around the 9 practices. Today we're going to look at the 3 in the middle, the C, the T, and the I. So this was the word cloud that we talked about last week that, highlighted each of the words in the acronym practices, but also gave other words just to remind people that their version of a word might be different than my version of a word. And so it's important to think about, well, what does that really mean to you as the listener here? Okay, So today we are just slightly covering up this word. Oh, I can move this now. Zoom's been updated. Okay, so today we're going to look at commitment, and then we're going to look at the word tuned in, and then we're going to look at the word identity. So a commitment is a promise to yourself and others demonstrated through daily action. And at the heart of training to compete and to be the best you can, commitment is at the heart of that. There's just no question about it. If you're not committed to your craft, then there's no possible way that you're going to be the best of your abilities, whatever that is.
Yeah.
What I saw, yeah, go ahead, Dean.
No, I think that, we always talk about, you got to be committed. You got to show your commitment and everything else. And I think it's, each one of these words or descriptors is, and the description behind it is so critical to fully understand. I think we pass over it. We go with the flow, but this is the time that I think we dig a little deeper and have a bit better under a grasp of it. That will only helps, I think, strengthen our abilities.
Right. So if we look at this, let's just break down this definition for a minute. A promise to yourself. When you think of commitment, we often think about committing to something, not necessarily committing to yourself. And so it's important, and that's why I put a promise to yourself first. It's important to understand that commitment is about what you're saying you will do. And so a great question to ask individuals is, what is your promise? How are you describing your promise to yourself? What is it? Yeah. And how is that showing up every day? Versus another way, which is, you told me you were committed and you are not showing up.
Yeah.
Looking at that from a coaching perspective, we want the first way. Because the second way just provides guilt and shame. It doesn't allow for an understanding of really what's going on in that individual's situation. When you told me, or you committed to me, that puts somebody on the defensive. And so by asking them, well, how is your promise that you made to yourself showing up in this moment, in this practice, at this workout, at this swim meet, with your nutrition, with your sleep, with your mental visualization? How is that promise showing up for yourself? Because, and this is my great concern about athletes today, is that because they're so recognized in the world of social media, that in many cases they get on this roller coaster of doing it because they get recognized, and they're doing it for other people, even though they love it. And I'm not saying they don't love it. It just becomes this roller coaster of other people pulling them along the system. What I'm asking athletes to do is step back and ask themselves, well, what's the promise I'm making to myself? And then you think about what's the promise you're making through others. And then what are those actions that are showing up for both yourself and for others?
Yeah, it's like the way I see this, or the way it's sort of seeping into my thinking, is that this is a form of really of their ownership, taking a good sizable responsibility and owning it. And I think that's we always say, well, you need to own this, or you need to step up or whatever. But at the same time, we need to know what are the foundations, what are the pieces that will actually make it happen, and make it happen in a sustainable, reliable way.
Right. And even in that language that you said, as a coaching moment here, you need to own this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's even better to say, help me understand how the promise that you've made to yourself to compete in this sport at a high level is actualizing today.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that coaching question, what happens is you open up an opportunity for the individual to talk,
Mm-hmm.
to share, to be vulnerable.
Yep.
Well, actually, my mom and dad are getting divorced, and so I'm really struggling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you need to own it, shoves the emotional problem that they're really facing right now down under the surface,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want to disappoint the coach.
Right.
And so, really having athletes write out what their promise to themselves is. What is my commitment? How does that show up? What is my promise?
Right.
And then in times of struggle where it's not showing up, the coach being curious about it versus directive about it. Because normally something else is going on underneath the surface.
Yeah, as always, it's a cluttered. It can be cluttered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course that is done through daily action.
Yeah.
I had a individual the other day connect with me, very senior executive at an organization, and he's looking to make a switch in careers. And this individual, I kept saying, I want to get clarity on what your commitment is. Like, I don't hear it. I hear these grandiose ideas. And what I said to the individual is, you are telling me you want to participate in the Olympics, but you haven't told me what sport you want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I forced this person to go back to the drawing board and start telling me his daily actions to what sport he wants to be in, that he wants to work towards, because it wasn't clear.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah, it makes good sense. And again, as you relayed last week, is that the importance of asking the questions. And one question might lead to a bit of feedback, but another question might get to a deeper sense of that. And so this is where you're starting to dial me in a bit to get focused on those questions. You're right.
Yeah. And just, how we approach each athlete. I mean, 99.9% of coaches out there are so committed to their athletes' well-being and their athletes' performance too. Like, we can't just talk about well-being without talking about what their job is performance. And they hold this precious person in their hands. And as we move towards this new concept of coaching, we need to step back and stop being as directive and start being more inquisitive.
Yes.
Because the athletes want to perform. They're not doing it because they want to be crappy.
No.
Right? So
yeah.
The next one is tuned in. And this one was a real surprise to me. It's a sensitivity to the relationships, the environment, and contributing to something bigger than yourself. And this one, in the quantitative questionnaire that I sent out to the interviewees, came back significant in that those that succeeded were tuned into helping others.
Okay.
And there were also tuned in the next iteration of the life. They wanted to provide something bigger than just their success. Whether in the pool it was talking to a younger athlete, I remember when you took a team down to Charlotte and to the, what was it's one of the big,
the ultra swim. It was the ultra swim.
the
Yeah,
ultra
that's
swim.
right. Yeah.
And you know, a couple of the great American backstrokers, when Annie broke the national age group record, they were just so kind to her and so encouraging. And you know, that's being tuned into other people. Your performance matters, never taking away that aspect of it, but also realizing that other people in your environment matter too.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you describe just that, it brings me back to last summer in 2019 at the World Championships when Maggie McNeil, a London person, how about that, Melinda?
I know.
Some great things come out of London, Ontario. Many things do.
And Michigan.
And Michigan. Oh my gosh, there's a real string there. And seeing Maggie rise to the occasion and win the World Championships in the 100 butterfly against Sarah Sostrom, the incredible Sarah Sostrom. There's many takeaways from that. But it was after the fact when they made. I think there was a photo shot after they did their medal presentation, and they had written in the waiting room of get their medals. Well wishes for the Japanese swimmer who had been going through cancer treatment. She was a top ranked world level swimmer, and you know, as you say, you take it, you share that kindness, you take it away from just yourselves, and you actually share, you know, that whole level of compassion,
right?
And you know, that's what brought me to think of that. I thought that was just really first class, world class demonstration. But we can do this. We all can do this, especially as we move forward.
Right. And, you know, it's not just, I mean, you know, another example of this tuned into other situations is an individual that I coached a while back. And this particular person wasn't tuned in to the culture of the organization. They wanted to go in and change things right away, to not understand why things were the way they were. And I'm not saying that change wasn't something that needed to happen, but really understanding why things are done before you jump in and say, well, I'm smartest in the room. I'm the one that can provide all the answers. We call that answer man, without asking the right questions. And so, you know, what is the environment that you operate in, and what are the pros of that environment, and how can you contribute to that environment? And then how can you help evolve that environment? Not because you're the expert in the room, but really because you want the environment to be, and to prove, not because you're the expert in the room and you want to be validated by that expertise, but really because you want to create something bigger than yourself, something for the organization. And you know, when you're labeled smart, or you're labeled a rising star, or you're labeled, you know, when you're labeled, and that's going to get us into identity in a minute, you know, you keep having to live up to that expectation. And being tuned in to others in your organization or in the swimming pool, and realizing that, again, we're all committed to this goal. How can I contribute to the whole, not just to my own greatness?
That triggers another thought as we are going through the process currently right now with an intended return to training. We'll be launching something in the very short time, but it is all about being tuned in and understanding the conditions, the environment, the why of why we need to do it in this manner. We have a preconceived idea, but now we're being assisted in understanding a bit further, a bit deeper, and that's going to take some skills, skills that I think for both athletes, coaches, parents are going to really have to grapple with, and take things as they come, but understand why. But I think
Right.
that's where what you were just describing there is you need to be tuned in to that, and you whatever you had before or preconceived ideas or notions, you might have to just be flexible and nimble enough to adjust and adapt.
Right. I mean, as people return to their craft,
Hmm.
we have to step back and say, we're not favoring one group over another. We have to do this slowly.
Yes.
We have to understand the whole situation, not just one particular superstar's
Yep.
situation. And so understanding and stepping back and saying, well, can I explain to my club effectively in conversation the whole situation and
Hmm.
why we're moving forward in the way that we're moving forward?
And that's exactly that, and that's going to take some courage. I'll call it courage, because that's stepping out of what they know, and
Right.
they're stepping into something what they don't know, and which I think will, as I keep saying, some really good things are going to come out of all this.
Yeah.
What they are, we're not sure, but good things will come out of this. And I think having some tools and skills, as you said, as we started this whole process, 8 or 9 weeks ago, Melinda, when people take the time, it will help. It will help,
Yeah.
help things move forward.
Right. And I agree. I'm just going to step us back to PRA.
Hmm.
Proficiency. You don't necessarily have the proficiency to talk about the virus, not you, like your coaches
That's right.
or your board of directors. They haven't developed that yet. And so that's going to take some work to get comfortable. It's like the first time that we did our video, like I look back and go, oh my goodness, I didn't even know what I was doing with Zoom. I didn't know, that I had to wear lipstick, all of these things that, I had to develop knowledge and skill to be able to
Yeah.
talk coherently on a video. You also have to have regulation. You have to not always say exactly what's on your mind.
Hmm.
You have to
Hmm.
be able to control your thoughts and
Yeah.
your emotions and be able to be, keep to your message.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you're hiding anything, but if you throw in, a message that isn't moving towards that goal of what you want for the environment eventually, then you're going to sidetrack some group or some person, and you're not going to get what you want. You're not going to reach that
That's right.
goal. The next one is attitude. You have to have an attitude that you're still learning.
Yeah.
That you're not going to get this perfect. And so realize that you're going to make mistakes.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
figure out how you turn the corner to correct the mistake and get better. And then obviously the commitment to the message, commitment to returning, commitment to getting our athletes, eventually all of our athletes, back in the water. So
Hmm.
the reason why I did a step back there is because I really want our listeners to understand that these are all intertwined. As we
Yes.
tune into the environment, that we are not one, we are a group.
That's right.
That as a group, we're trying to create great citizens, but also great athletes.
Yeah.
And understanding from an athlete perspective that you might be a good swimmer, but you're not special.
Hmm.
You still put your pants on the same way as
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah. I remember that. Yes, yes, yes.
And so it's important to, understand this tuned in thing. And those that I interviewed, I'm not saying every athlete out there, but those that I interviewed, and they were identified as people that had had great success and then found great success in their next iteration of life, whatever that success was. Those individuals understood this contribution, this being tuned into other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Finally, and I briefly touched upon it, is identity. And this is this awareness and sense of self. And, our identity, we often say, as an athlete, well, I'm a swimmer or I'm a swammer, I'm a coach, I'm this, I'm that. But we're so much more than that. Our identity permeates everything we do. So as I step onto the golf course, I'm a golfer. But I'm also an Olympian. And so people expect me to be a good golfer because I'm an Olympian. We saw this last week with the match between Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning versus Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. And, those first few holes, everybody expected Peyton and Tom to be great golfers, which they are. They're good golfers, but they weren't used to competing in that setting of camera, mic'd up, a huge audience. I mean, I don't know what the numbers were, but the audience was unbelievable. And Tom Brady, who was Michigan quarterback, who, has won X amount of Super Bowl rings for the New England Patriots, he was awful. Like, you can't even believe how awful he was. And he lost track of the rules, but everybody kept expecting him to have this identity.
Yeah.
And so being this great athlete, and he's a great quarterback and he's a good golfer, but when you took him outside of that situation of golfing with his buddies, he really struggled. And so it's really having this awareness and this sense of yourself, this humility that, in this moment, this is who I am.
That was the exact word that, as you brought in identity, and I was just thinking about the humility piece, and that's another stringer towards humanity, and it's it's either spun around back to people first rather than athlete first. I think there is a movement to really pull that out in the way we do things, and as we're going to move forward, I think there's a lot. Definitely a focus of looking at the individual as a person first, and understand that all the way around before we get to the athlete piece.
Yeah. And I'm thrilled to hear that, because I think that will help to reduce some of the mental health issues that athletes face. That they're acknowledged as a person rather than not in amateur sports, but certainly in professional sports, a piece of meat. I was talking to a professional hockey player this last week, and we were on a group chat call, and somebody said to him, tell me about the difference in coaching between being an amateur athlete and a professional athlete. And he said, well, all coaches are different. But those that, when we're a professional athlete, we're a commodity. And, we don't know from week to week whether we might get called into the GM's office and say, please pass me your playbook back. And that came out time and time again in the interviews that I did, that fear that, they're not acknowledged as a person, but mostly as a commodity.
Yeah. And we have to, and we have to be, and another word I think of is just we have to understand to be humble
Right.
along the process, right?
Yeah.
You enter a room, you need to have that humility, but that humbleness, and park whatever, as you said earlier, um, that you can't be that. What was your term on the person that has all the answers?
Oh, answer man.
Answer man. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. You gotta just park, park it sometimes and just level it out and be part of the process and part of the
Yeah.
engagement all the way around. Yeah.
There's a great book out there for anybody who wants a book to read other than mine, called by Marilee Adams, called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life.
Hmm.
And it really provides a reason why we need to ask questions. Because if you jump to the answers, then you can check it off, but you might not be asking the right questions to get
Yeah,
the right answers.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
back to this awareness and sense of
Hmm.
yourself. It's awareness of who you are and the sense of yourself, but also the sense of the impact you have on others. So, the world record holder who walks into the swimming pool and says hello to the receptionist,
Hmm.
that's having a sense of, this person matters. When I interviewed Jim Poplinski, who was the captain of the Calgary Flames and won the Stanley Cup, he said, I am constantly aware that when someone approaches me, that that I need to respect that, because that individual has had a sense of courage to come up and ask me
Mm.
or tell me a story about, remembering a shot I took. And so, having that sense of yourself and realizing that although in that moment it might be inconvenient, it's also important to realize that you do have an impact on other people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
So
a swimmer that comes to mind right now when you're describing that is Brittany McLean. Brittany
yes.
McLean, and the story, the whole thing about Brittany McLean is that she was a watcher. I remember back in the 2009 Canada Games when they were in PEI,
Yeah.
and Annie was on that team, and Brittany was just starting to come along, but she came and watched the competition. I remember her being there and watching her teammates and so on and so forth. And then years later, she's top of the game.
Right.
She's a competitor. She's racing for the podium and things like that. And it's just really wonderful to see that. But the other part of it is, to get back to it, she recognized others that are around her, whether it was as she was coming up going through the pathway towards to the podium, and then when she reached the podium, she still was quite uh, aware
Right.
of
Yeah.
people around her and things like that.
Yeah, no, Brittany's an excellent example of all 9 of these.
Yeah.
I know her because she and Annie are very close. I know her quite well, and she exemplifies, or is an exemplar of these 9 practices.
Hmm.
So great,
Hmm.
great example there.
Yes.
Good. So that finishes out. Any questions on?
No, I think this is great, and I really liked how you went back to the first 3 pieces and stitched them along to connect with the middle, and this is how, at least in sport, how I see it. We work on process, we work on sequencing, we work on building from one to the next and things like that. And this is exactly what that does. It actually is a step away from the pool per se, the water per se, to the field or the ice rink, and actually does the same thing as that we're in tune with as a coach and as an athlete. And
Right.
I think this is wonderful. Yeah, this is fantastic.
Excellent. Good. Well, super excited to dive into the next 3 next
Yeah.
week. And in the meantime, I hope you have a great weekend.
Yes.
And I'll look forward to chatting next week with you.
All right. Thank you very much, Melinda. And for those that haven't quite got onto your new book yet, Personal Next, please do so. And I know every time Lindsay will put a little piece up there and everything else, but it's a great read. It's a great resource that you don't. It will be at the top. If it's on a pile, it'll be at the top because you can go back to it, or it will be front and center in the bookshelf. I know that as we go through this.
Thank you. And I guess it's interesting as I think about the book. Here it is, and I flag pages. One of the things I'm most proud of are at the end of each chapter, I do a little summary with some questions. Because I think it's important, these are the ideas I'm presenting, but I want you to apply them to yourself. But at the end of each section, I do a practices in play. So I take these 9 practices and I ask questions around how they're showing up for you. And so I think it's, that's something that from a coaching perspective, I think it's a valuable resource to step back and think about what are those practices in play.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, we have been ingrained to do. Go back and look at where they've been, what are they doing, what did we do, even a year before. And it just means it's evolving.
Right.
And it's a manner. So thank you very much, Melinda. Have
You're
a great
welcome.
rest of your week and a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds great. Take care. Bye.
Yep.